Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. This is Jim Cunningham. Welcome to our podcast, Faith Influencer. Sometimes I have an agenda that I've mapped out for a few weeks on what we're going to cover in our podcast, but sometimes I'm just responding to some questions or to some comments, and that's the case today. Today I'm responding to several of you who've asked the question, have I been single too long? Well, how long is too long? Well, there's not a particular time, but I'm going to say some of you waited too long, some of you not. How do I know the difference? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in today's podcast. Have I been single too long? Now, let me describe my brother. I hope he doesn't listen to this. My brother has been single for 30 years. 30 years. Oh, he's had girlfriends, but he's married to a boat and fishing poles and rifles to go hunt. But he's been by himself for 30 years. I would absolutely 100% feel sorry for the girl who decided she wanted to marry him. You say, that's awful about your brother. Why would you say that? Because after 30 years, do you know how set he is in his ways? Do you know how difficult it would be for him to change and to bring someone else into his life? I'm going to say in his case, 30 years single, it might be too late for him to remarry for those reasons. Okay, that's not most of your situations. Most of you who commented said to me, I was married a long time. I've been single 14 years. Someone said I've been single 17 years. It's been easy going because I haven't had the conflict of a spouse, but have I been single too long to remarry? Not necessarily, but let's walk through this. Let's give you some practical guidelines to answer this question. So one of the problems with being by yourself and alone for all of this time is statistically, people who are single begin to experience isolation. Now I'm talking about those of you who have been married before, okay? Those of you who have been married before and you went through a divorce and now you've been single for a while. That isolation turns into loneliness. That loneliness oftentimes turns into depression, and depression can lead to anxiety. That's one of the problems with being single after you had a relationship, is that you walk this trail of sadness. So that would be a question I would have for you. Are you on this trail of sadness, of feeling isolated, of lonely, depression, anxiety? Are you feeling that? If you are, then maybe you need to consider that it's time for you to enter into a new relationship. I'm going to talk about how you do that at the end, by the way. So that's one of the questions. If you're feeling lonely, are you feeling isolated? Maybe you need to have a relationship. Here's the next one. One of the reasons why people find themselves single for a long time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, one of the reasons why is because they refuse to turn loose of previous hurts. Sometimes your divorce that you went through was so painful for you that you can't turn loose of that previous hurt. It's an inability to forgive. Remember, forgiving doesn't have anything to do with the other person. It doesn't release them from what they did wrong and how they hurt you. It releases you from having to carry that weight and that burden. Some of you are unwilling to turn loose of that hurt. And as a result, you're unwilling to have a healthy relationship with someone else. So you may be single because you're hanging on to the past. It's time for you to turn loose of the past. It's time for you to get some tools, maybe work with someone, a counselor or something, how to figure out how I'm going to turn loose of this past and not affect my present. So don't allow your present, don't allow your future to be ruined because you can't turn loose of the past. Who does that help? It leads you down this same path of loneliness. Also, it turns you into something you don't want to be. So let me talk about this for a while and don't get offended at me, okay? Sometimes people who hang on to previous hurts, and I'm going to use a different word, who are still bitter, their hearts are filled with bitterness, you become that cranky old person that no one wants to be around because you're filled with bitterness. Maybe that's why you don't have a relationship now that's healthy, because you didn't turn loose of the past. You're filled with bitterness. It's affected your personality. It's affected who you are. And you're that cranky old crotchety person that no one wants a relationship with anyways. You know what your first step is? Your first step is find freedom from your past. Find freedom from your past. And then the next thing, how do I find the right person this time? It was so painful to go through a divorce. I don't want to remarry the wrong person. Well, that's always the tendency. The tendency is always to remarry the wrong person. As a matter of fact, I don't know why this is true. Maybe there's some psychological reason behind it, but people often remarry that very thing that they ran from. I'll give you an example. It's crazy to me how statistically someone who was married to an alcoholic and it ends in a divorce, somehow or another enters into a relationship with another alcoholic. It happens over and over. And so you're not going to repeat that mistake. And so you're asking the question, how do I find the right person? Well, let me give you a biblical response to this. Let me tell you how the Bible says you find the right person. First of all, I love the King James language on this one verse, because it's sort of funny. It says, he that findeth a wife, in this case, or you could say a spouse, he that findeth a spouse findeth a good thing. Well, a spouse doesn't like to be called a good thing, but that's just the King James Old English language. He that finds a spouse finds something good. But what you have to understand is that word find doesn't mean that you go on this hunt for a spouse. Doesn't mean you're out looking around, going places to find this relationship. That's not what it means. As a matter of fact, when the Bible says that he that findeth a spouse finds a good thing, it means that marriage is a good thing. It's a good thing. Relationships are a good thing. But how you find that person, this is what the word means. The word means you live your life. You live for the Lord. You go through your daily business and let God send the right person across your path. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that you're out like searching on this treasure hunt for this right person. You'll probably mess that up. Let God send that right person across your path. It's really interesting how God does that, because you never know when that right person is going to show up. You're not looking for them. You don't know which direction they're coming from. I don't know if they're coming from the north, south, east, or west, but you watch, you work on yourself. Catch this. You work on yourself. You become the person. You become the person that someone else would like to be in a relationship. You become healthy. You take care of your past bitterness, unforgiveness, issues. You become the right person. And then you know what's going to happen? Mark this down. God's going to send that right person across your path because you're ready. You're now ready to enter into this relationship. So you become that right person. Watch what God does. He sends them. And listen, you'll be so much happier to let God send you the right person than for you to go on this treasure hunt. Now, let me give you one last reason why you may consider that, yes, you should remarry. It's, again, this biblical principle. It's where Paul said, if you burn with lust, that's how the Bible describes it. If you have those sexual feelings and you're missing that, you know what? That's something God has put within you. And if you need that and desire that, and maybe you're going the wrong direction with the wrong people because you want that, then maybe you're that person who needs to pray about having a real relationship with someone and a right relationship with someone because you have those physical desires. That may be also a reason why you need to enter into a relationship. Maybe you've been single too long. So no, if you've been single for 14 years, that's not too long. 17 years, one lady who maybe you're listening now, you said, I've been single for 17 years. No, that's not too long. Are you the right person? Have you worked on yourself? Are you growing? Are you ready to enter into that? As a matter of fact, this is one of the things that Paul said. Paul said, are you ready to submit yourselves to one another? In Ephesians 5:21, he said, submit yourself to each other. Are you ready to give yourself to someone? That someone's ready to give themselves to you. If you are in that position, then consider entering into a relationship. Now, for all of those that I'm making feel guilty because I'm sounding like, yes, you ought to go remarry, let's talk about singleness for a moment. Do you know that the Bible describes singleness as a gift? Paul said he had that gift. Paul describes singleness as, in fact, Paul describes being single as a greater gift than the need to marry. Now, most of us have the need to marry. Most of us were created for those kinds of relationships for different reasons. But Paul said, those of you who have the gift of singleness, that you are way more effective for the things of the Lord than the person who's married. As a matter of fact, just think about it and just in a real way. Those of us who are married, we have all kinds of things we have to deal with. We have all kinds of burdens. Then you're going to have children. You're going to have all of the things with the kids, and then your spouse. You have to work through all of those issues, and then you're planning and preparing, and you're working, and you're earning an income to provide for all of these things. And that's okay because God created us that way. But do you see why Paul said if you have the gift of singleness, which means you're not burning with sexual desire, which means that you're not overwhelmed with isolation and loneliness. If you have the gift of singleness, you are so much more single-minded in what you're trying to accomplish than those of us who are married. You can accomplish so much more because you're not distracted by all the cares of the world and everything around us. So don't let me make you feel guilty by describing the need to remarry and find a relationship. Embrace your gift for singleness if that is you, and then keep your eye on that prize and serve the Lord. So these are the issues. Have I been single too long? Probably not. But if you've been single for a while, work on yourself, become the person that someone else is going to enjoy being with, and watch God bring the right person to you. And if you've been given the gift of singleness, then embrace that and watch yourself become very successful and accomplished in your singleness. Either way, embrace it as a gift from God. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Always like it, share it, tell others about it. We appreciate you being a part. Thank you.